Ladies and gents, reaction. This is why Afghanistan is impossible to conquer by the channel RealLifeLore. Yeah, this didn't age well, did it? Even 2 days ago, RealLifeLore commented, "Welp." Yeah. Obviously, the recent events, as soon as United States military pulled out, Taliban took over the entire country. Yeah, it's been in the news a lot, even though, I don't know much about that, right? I just saw the headlines here and there. I don't know much detail about that, although, what are politics that goes inside, and, whose fault is it, who's not. I don't know anything about it, so I'm not going to comment on that. But yeah, that's, pretty strong thing that is happening there. It's, yeah. So let's watch this one. Yeah, Afghanistan, so far I've seen the videos where basically Afghanistan geography is in a way that, it's pretty hard. That's why in past, 10, 15 years, when United States Army has been there trying to fight Taliban, and obviously during that point, they couldn't, get the job done because, all the caves and things, the geography is way too complex. So for the natives, it's if the natives who knows the place, for them it's a real defensive position, while some foreigner who comes, it's pretty hard for them. So why Afghanistan is impossible to conquer, it's more like why Afghanistan is impossible to conquer for foreigners. So yeah, that would be more accurate title here. So let's watch this one. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the reaction I did, there's a link in the description. Check out the cast over different playlists like RealLifeLore. I uploaded quite a few RealLifeLore reactions already. So if you haven't seen them, check out that playlist. Check out the playlist too, like History, CGP Grey, or Simplified, Overly Sarcastic Production. Yeah, let's watch this one.
This video is made possible by CuriosityStream and Nebula. Watch another, full-length companion video to this one that explains the entire history of the modern wars fought in Afghanistan on Nebula, which you can access by signing up for the CuriosityStream Nebula bundle deal for just $15 a year at curiositystream.com/realliflore. In 2001, the United States military invaded Afghanistan. 20 years later, the US is withdrawing and the Taliban appears to be stronger than ever, with control of up to 85% of the country. In 1979, the Soviet Union also invaded Afghanistan, and after 9 years, they also withdrew and the regime they fought so hard to prop up almost immediately collapsed. And before them, the British Empire invaded.
Holy shit, can this guy predict something more accurately or what? Even here he said that, so big. First of all, it's probably the truth then, if RealLifeLore can basically predict this. Like, when United States pulled out, that's when he made the video, just I guess a week or two ago. I don't know when this video was uploaded, because apparently YouTube stopped giving me the dates. I don't know why. So I think, basically, like he said, when the United States pulled out, just I guess a week or two ago, Taliban still had 85% of the country in their control, which means whenever a foreigner comes there, right, they really have no idea how to do anything, since geography is so complex and there are so many hidden places that, if you don't know which is where, I guess you can't really conquer Afghanistan. So like he says, Soviet Union tried in here, United States tried, and whatever stability they probably tried to do at the point. As soon as they leave, suddenly it collapsed, because obviously foreigners don't know which thing is where and how to basically surgically get the key points, because they don't know what the key points are. Is basically all the caves and things. It's impossible to see it.
Afghanistan on 3 separate occasions and failed to conquer them in each instance. Today, Afghanistan has a smaller population than California in a territory that's only a little larger than France. So how is it that a country of this small size was capable of resisting 3 of the world's most powerful military juggernauts from history? There's a lot of answers to that question, but let's start with the easy.
I won't call it small. Okay, it's small in that sense, sure, but yeah, it's big enough, and especially look at all the mountain ranges.
Easiest to understand and perhaps the most obvious: geography. In reality, Afghanistan is little more than a geographical expression. All of her borders were arbitrarily drawn up by outside foreign powers more than a century ago.
Yeah.
Its small population is composed of a loose association of 14 different ethno-linguistic groups and numerous more tribes. many of which, like the Uzbeks, Tajiks, and Pashtuns, straddle the country's borders. Artificial boundaries set up by Westerners hundreds of years ago that mean very little to them. The Pashtuns make up nearly half of Afghanistan's population today, but 2/3 of all Pashtuns live next door in neighboring Pakistan and are a minority group there. The border between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
So basically, after the Ottoman Empire's fall, British and French basically fucked the entire Middle East by drawing the borders wherever they can.
Pakistan runs directly through the Pashtun tribal area and divides the 60 million Pashtun people between both countries. This boundary was artificially decided by the British Empire back in 1893, and to date, not a single government based in Afghanistan.
Only British want the French involved as well.
Afghanistan has ever officially ratified it. Imagine if in Europe, Poland was divided between Germany and Russia, and a wall was built directly between both sides of where the Poles live. Obviously, the Poles would never recognize this border and routinely cross it to visit family and friends. And the Pashtuns largely treat the Afghan-Pakistan border the very same way. The border here is extremely mountainous and rural, so patrolling it from the Pakistani government's perspective has always been quite challenging. This has allowed Pashtun insurgents operating within Afghanistan the valuable ability to easily escape across the border into the friendly Pashtun areas of Pakistan, regroup and recover, recruit more men, and then travel back into Afghanistan freshly supplied and ready for more combat. Neither the Afghan border nor the Taliban recognize this border as legitimate, and there are at least 235 known crossing points across the border and through the mountains between both countries. Militants, drugs, money, and supplies can easily be smuggled into Afghanistan by way of Pakistan, and it's made all the easier by many of the Pashtuns of Pakistan being more sympathetic to the Afghan or Taliban cause. This has led many people to label the Afghan-Pakistan border as the most dangerous border in the entire world. And recently, as a result of all of this, by the end of June 2021, Pakistan has finally finished building a fence across the entire length of the border, specifically to stop all of this, and has restricted border crossings to only 16 legally designated locations. But this is all only the start of what makes Afghanistan an almost impossible place.
Wait a minute, Pakistan built the entire fence in that length? Well, at least that's something, right? Because if that was the thing that they were just, walking back and forth. So yeah, that is at least something. But, that's to stop bad elements, sure. But that still divides, same group of people between two countries, right? Even the, basically, peaceful people of the same group could have just traveled back and forth to see their relative or whatever, since it was the border drawn by the British. And both people live in both sides of the country. Now, because of the fence, even they can't walk back and forth.
Place to conquer. I mean, just look at the map. Afghanistan is landlocked, so getting your troops and supplies there requires the cooperation of at least one of the 6 countries that borders it: Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, China, and of course Pakistan. But even once you get across one of these countries and you arrive at Afghanistan's borders, you're going to be met with Afghanistan's monumentally challenging terrain. Despite being in the center of the world's most populous continent, Afghanistan has always been heavily isolated and largely rural and underpopulated because of this. The high peaks of the Hindu Kush mountain range were some of the tallest and biggest mountains found anywhere on the planet. 75% of Afghanistan's territory is considered to be mountainous, and nearly half of our territory has an elevation above 2,000 meters, which makes Afghanistan among the most mountainous countries of the world, and among the most isolated too as a result. These huge mountains act like natural walls in more ways than one. They help to keep invaders out, but they...
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows that, even especially centuries ago when the kings, basically fought knights with swords and things. There's a reason why everybody built fort on the mountains and, at the, basically hills and things like that, because it's perfect strategic position. So it's not just better for defense, it's better for hiding too, because there could be lots of caves and things that nobody knows about besides the locals where it exists. So how are you supposed to find that? You can't just go one by one and check every single mountain range and every hill here and there. I mean, that would take literally forever. So yeah.
They also separate communities within and make transporting supplies across challenging. These are all very difficult factors to overcome from the perspective of any outside invader. There are dozens
Look at that. This is just something. Look, Imagine you're, some of the foreign forces, American forces, whatever, stationed here. Okay, let's find enemies there. All those mountain ridges, let's just find them there. How are you supposed to do that? Doesn't matter how much technology and resources you have. Look at those mountains.
Difficult factors to overcome from the perspective of any outside invader. There are dozens of valleys that zigzag in between the mountains of Afghanistan where most of the population resides. And since they're surrounded by some of the biggest and most formidable mountains on Earth, it's always been difficult to travel between them, and consequently, they're each sort of their own little world inside of Afghanistan. Over thousands of years, they each ended up developing their own rather distinctive cultures, identities, beliefs, tribes, and rulers, and thus, there's very little sense of Afghan nationhood.
Yeah, mountains or rivers are natural borders, basically, that people have been treating that for centuries.
And Afghan patriotism has never been a particularly strong motivating factor. Because of all these separate and rural communities that are difficult to travel between, the grip of any central government has always been weak and intermittent, while the valleys have largely governed themselves autonomously, especially in the countryside. Any semblance of Afghan national unity has always been a direct consequence of foreign powers invading and attempting to impose their rule over the whole, like with the British, Soviets, and recently Americans. Historically, and up to the present day to an extent, Afghanistan continues to operate in a way that's more similar to the Holy Roman Empire than the European Union. The ruler in the capital city, Kabul, may nominally wield de jure authority over the entire realm, like the Holy Roman Emperor, but is not able to wield de facto authority over all of the various princes, valleys, tribes, and clans, just like the Holy Roman Emperor.
I mean, if you give somebody a title, oh, I'm the emperor, I'm the main, leading body of the country, it's just words, man, if you can't enforce it.
Any invader coming in to occupy Afghanistan will struggle with all of the same issues that a domestic ruler will. Afghanistan's geography is not very conducive to a centralized authority, and neither is Afghanistan's infrastructure. Enforcing your authority across the various Afghan valleys means that you must move your troops and supplies from one to another through the various mountain passes that are often narrow and incredibly easy positions to set up an ambush in as a defender. These passes basically act like natural choke points for the movement of people all across Afghanistan, and up until the 1960s, there were hardly even any roads to speak of that went through them. Control over just a few of these mountain passes can ensure control over an entire valley, and sabotaging one can block the flow of supplies and troops for days, weeks, or even longer depending upon the severity of the damage. When the Soviets invaded the country, the Mujahideen defenders would ambush Soviet convoys as they traveled through these passes, and then immediately flee back and vanish into the caves of the mountains when they were fired back upon. They would set up roadblocks at river crossings or in other passes, and in some instances were successful enough to block entire roads for months or even years. The town of Khost near the Pakistan border was permanently sealed off from the rest of the country for the entire war by the Mujahideen, sabotaging a series of strategic roads, and the government forces blocked inside could only be supplied by air. And when the Americans invaded, these passes were just as vital. Most significant for them was the Khyber Pass here, the easiest and most direct path through the Hindu Kush between the Indian subcontinent and Central Asia. This path has been used for thousands of years by conquerors, traders, and missionaries all alike, and is without a doubt one of the most strategic locations to hold on the entire planet. At one point, nearly 80% of all NATO and US supplies that were being brought into Afghanistan by road were all coming through the Khyber Pass via Pakistan, which is kind of ironic because most of the Taliban's equipment were also coming from across the border in Pakistan, just at different and more rural crossing points. The Taliban
there's a reason why it's a strategic point, because it's easier to use. Of course, Taliban's going to use that too.
Knew how critically important the Khyber Pass was to the American war effort, so it was a frequent target of sabotage efforts. In 2009, the Taliban blew up a bridge here that temporarily shut down the entire pass, and America was forced to broaden their supply lines into Afghanistan through the 3 Central Asian bordering countries as well. In the years before all of this war, the Afghan government had attempted to build a circular highway that would connect all of their major economic centers together. But over the decades of civil war and Soviet intervention, the highway was in very bad shape. By the time the United States invaded in 2001, there were only a mere 50 kilometers of paved roads to speak of in the entire country that's bigger than France. For comparison, France has 1.1 million kilometers of paved roads in a smaller and significantly less mountainous territory. The lack of good roads only made the
Come on, man. I get it. The size, because of the size you compare, but don't compare France and Afghanistan. Come on. France is a basically European country, European colony, basically. A colonizing, basically, country, which was an empire, basically. You can't really compare those two, but I get his point.
the disparate valleys and communities of the Afghan interior even more isolated from each other, and it made transporting troops and supplies a logistical nightmare for the Americans and the Soviets before them, none of which helped at all for the country's stability. As with all things in Afghanistan, the development of new roads is difficult and expensive because of the harsh mountainous terrain, the cold winter weather that often chews roads up, and sabotage from the Taliban and other insurgents. Building or repairing roads in the country necessitates hiring security and necessitates building them across harsh geography and climates, which means that it can get incredibly expensive, as much as $5 million per mile in some locations. And this is all in a country where the average person only makes a little over $500 a year, one of the poorest and least developed nations on the planet. The construction of a single mile of road within Afghanistan is about the combined annual wages of 9,800 Afghanis. So, obviously, the funding for all of these projects has to come from abroad. Ultimately, Afghanistan is easy to invade and take over, but it's almost impossible to effectively hold it for long. The landscape is huge, with a lot of rural and empty places for insurgents and rebels to hide. Getting troops in and establishing supply lines through massive mountains and narrow passes is challenging and easy for guerrilla combatants to harass and disrupt. The relationship with neighboring Pakistan is complex, and Pashtun insurgents can easily cross the border and regroup without much fear, and then return to fight in Afghanistan whenever ready. The flow of insurgent supplies, money, and manpower across the border is difficult to stop through the hundreds of high and remote mountain passes, and requires the cooperation of Pakistan, which she is sometimes willing to give and other times not. Centralized rule is almost impossible to enforce outside of Kabul by way of Afghanistan's geographic reality, and nation building is inherently impossible because even the concept of an Afghan nation among Afghanistan's various ethnicities and tribes is tenuous at best, and certainly radically different from the Western idea of nation-states such as Germany or France. The colonial-era borders of Afghanistan dictated by the British over a century ago are probably the biggest core reason for Afghanistan's instability, but Afghanistan has been particularly unstable even by former British colonial meddling standards. For the past 43 years, Afghanistan has been embroiled in constant warfare, and it's an incredibly complex story to tell. From a communist revolution that enforced state atheism in one of the most conservative and religious countries on the planet, to an invasion and occupation by the Soviet Union, 3 subsequent civil wars, and then the invasion of the Americans and NATO, and the United States occupation that's all set to finally end after nearly 20 years in about a month from now. It is one of the most fascinating, violent, and controversial conflicts of both the 20th and 21st centuries, and unfortunately, not acceptable for me to cover on YouTube due to their terms of service.
Damn. Yeah, I mean, the geography alone, as soon as you see the map, you can see how many mountain ranges there are. The geography and obviously the way the borders are drawn. Yeah, for the native people, who knows how the geography is and which things are where, for them it's easier. That's why, the Taliban took over Kabul and entire Afghanistan as soon as the Americans left, because they know what is what. But foreign countries would have a problem with that. Damn, seriously, Afghanistan is really complex geographically, right? Which is where, and all this time Soviet Union failed, Americans failed in this way, basically, because it's nearly impossible to find who's what, who's where, I guess.
I know how making videos on YouTube works, and I know that this video already has a super high chance of being demonetized and unpromoted by YouTube's algorithm because of what I'm discussing. But the moment that I really start diving into the whole history of the Afghan conflicts, why they began, how they were fought, and how it all led to where we are today, it's a guarantee that this video will be censored and you won't get to see it. So
it's just like, well, I don't even know how old this video is because it's not showing date. I'm pretty sure it's pretty recent, right? It's a week old and it has 3.2 million views. So YouTube didn't really censor it.
So instead, I created another full-length companion video to this one with all of that controversial but fascinating information included and uploaded that version to Nebula, which, as you've probably heard by now, is home to tons of exclusive ad-free content like my entire Modern Conflict series, with additional full-length videos.
Yeah, people, I guess go to the description with the original video page link, and from there support this channel by clicking on the curiositystream.com/. Yeah, there's the link there. This is a great channel. I love RealLifeLore, all the topics he covers. What's the best thing about RealLifeLore is he frequently uploads videos, right? For the, you know, the level this channel is, right? 4.5 million subscribers, and that level of quality his research and video has. I'm surprised that he uploads what, 3-4 videos a month easily, or 2-3 videos. That is surprising compared to the other creators. So yeah, I really love this channel, all the information he gives. Yeah, this he uploaded this. First I'm like, okay, what are the chances? Look at that. He uploaded a video about Afghanistan is impossible to conquer, and then the event happened. But no, he uploaded because United States were leaving, right? He knew that. And he also says in the video like how 85% of the territory, when Americans were there, 85% of the territories were already under Taliban. That's how complex the geographics, like you can't even know where are the enemies and where are not. So is it really surprising as soon as Americans left, Taliban took over the country if they had 85% of the country already? So yeah, damn, the scenario is really effed up, right? I mean, all the, God knows how many, people are going to suffer because of this. Yeah. Right, people, that was why Afghanistan is impossible to conquer by the channel RealLifeLore. If you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the reaction. There's a link in the description. Check out the cards for different places, check out the end cards, and yeah, I'll see you next time.